Alright, welcome back. I'm going to go over this car, the 2024 Trueno edition, in depth. Mentioned it earlier in my videos, and I kind of want to get more comfortable with the car, understand all the features and such before I had started this process. So I'm a little bit more familiar. I passed over 1,000 miles, and actually just recently. And I'd say I'm pretty comfortable with what it has, spent some time in it. So I'm just going to dive right into. Obviously the Trueno edition is a little bit different. We got 18-inch wheels, as you can see, and the bigger brakes. So this does have a big brake system from Brembo, which is the most obvious that you see. And these are massive for this car. And I mean massive because this car only weighs 2,800 pounds. And the most obvious is the color scheme. You got the white and the black. You have the black duckbill up here in the trunk. It actually has metallic flake in it, which is kind of cool. And then you have these decals on the side, but if you catch it in the right lighting, there's a little silhouette that says Trueno Edition in it. There you go. You guys see that? So it's just a little gem, kind of hidden. You got the black handles, also metallic flake with the paint. You got the black mirrors. And then the most obvious is the black vinyl stripe on the hood. Now, there's a few other things that the Trueno, or at least this year, came with the Trueno edition. I'll get into more depth here, but these headlamps, they actually move as you drive. I'll have to show it later because you could only be driving over 5 miles per hour, but if you can kind of tell, there's a little bit of a cutout in there to where you can actually see it swivel. It has room for it, so that's a little thing that Toyota added with this. It does have an LED light package. It does come with a courtesy, I think they call it a courtesy light for the door. I'll show you that later on when it's darker. And what consists of the LED package is basically the license plate, LED lights, all the headlight, tail lamp. Obviously they have LED lights. That's pretty much it for the exterior. You can't see it now, but it does have a pearlescent shine in it when the sun hits it directly. So they do call this color the halo in white for that reason. So let's kind of go right into the trunk. It has this little applique on it. It does say GR86. If you can catch it in the right lighting. There you go. Has the Trueno badge on the trunk. I got some stuff in here, but you can see that it says GR86 Trueno Edition. The Trueno Edition does come with all-weather mats. I'll just go in here and show you. It's all-weather mats say Trueno Edition on it. This particular version has heated seats. You can see the interior has the red and the black in it. The seat's interesting. I would say it's probably one of the better stock seats that recline that I've been in. They hug you probably as best as they can for an everyday street seat. So I'd probably say it's the most aggressive daily seat you can get for how it feels. It's pretty comfortable and it does hold you pretty well, but the center here, it's got some Alcantara type material. It does have a leather, or maybe a pleather, I don't know, material on the outside. It does have breathing ability. You can see how it has pores in it. And again, I said it's reclinable, so it's pretty comfortable. Back seats, not really existent. But, I mean, you can probably fit children back there. Oh. Yeah, to pick that up. Alright. So you can actually turn on your lights, but there's 2 stages to it. So if you press accessory once, all it does is it turns on. I'm going to turn it off now. 1 button press turns on some electronics. You got your touch screen. You can get your charge cable in there too. I picked that one up from Toyota. And that's pretty much more or less what works. And then once you hit it again, then you're pretty much on the 2nd stage, and that's as far as you can go before turning the car on. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Alright, there's some little toggles I want to go through on this digital cluster. Obviously it's a digital cluster with this GR wrapped. I like the red stitching everywhere. Obviously it says GR here. But you got all the red and black contrast in here. But back to this. So, over here, zoom in right there. So you got your battery gauge, you got your oil temp. Pretty straightforward. Now you see that little green car on the hill? That's hill assist. So because this is a manual, if I were to lift off of the brake, I can actually depress the clutch, put it in a gear, and then it'll give you a few seconds and count down. And you can know this by it starts flashing at you. So once it starts flashing at you, that means the countdown has began. Then you have, like, I don't know, 3 to 5 seconds to release the clutch and then accelerate. And at that moment, it'll go away. Toggle down. Pretty basic. The top line where it's dashed shows your active on the fly average mile per gallon as you're going. And then the one in the middle is your average from, I don't know, like I would say your last, I want to say tank, but even just the last few gallons that you've been driving, it gives you an average. So you have to drive for a minute to get that average. And then that one below shows you your remaining. That one shows you your average speed overall. The middle is your total clock running hours overall. And then the total miles overall. You do see tire pressure. And then, so I'm toggling with this switch, and I just was pressing down. Whoops, it's really close. But there you go. So I'm going to toggle right again. So here you have your G meter, and this one is active. I'm going to go down one. I'm going to show you where it's been, where I have been driving. So for those of you who aren't familiar, G-force is basically 1 G is the amount of weight, your body weight, applied pressure to your body. So this one, you can actually adjust it in this car. You can adjust up to 0.7 Gs or even 1 G. Right now it's set to 1. But you can see I took this car up a mountain road. I got pretty close. You can see a lot of left and right Gs being pulled, braking, acceleration. Now, over time, street driving, obviously, you're not going to reach that much, but imagine if you were spirited driving, higher speeds, like a track setting, you're going to reach these higher speeds. Or if you just have higher grip tires, you're going to reach these Gs. This is a torque graph, so as you're driving, you can actually see it, or as I free rev it. Now, in the manual it says it gives you an idea, concept of what your power band looks like, but it's not your accurate power band. So it doesn't actually display your accurate power as far as horsepower and torque. So, wah wah. And then you got your stopwatch. So if you want to go to the track and record your times, it can hold up to 50, I believe, lap times. You can start it there. Stop. Start, stop, and then it tells you can reset it. Start again. Back out of that. Then go over one more. That's music. Nothing special. cruise control. So there's two types on this car. If you press right here, see that display right there, the car with a bunch of lines. So that actually shows you your, it says cruise control, but it's adaptive cruise. So if you were to press this button here, you can actually toggle that down. And you see the little bar goes down. So if you keep on pressing it, you can actually adjust how close or how far. Max bars is about 200 feet. Minimum is about 100 feet. And then, if you want traditional type of cruise control, if you were to just hold this button down, you'll hear a little chime. And you see how that went away? If I press it down again, it'll come back. And let's just give it maximum distance just for kicks. And if you look up there, see how there's a little car, another way to indicate that it's gone. The little car and the little tack, the little car goes away. So now you're in traditional cruise, meaning you do not have adaptive cruise. Now while I'm on that, there are two cameras up here near the rear view mirror. Just gonna look good. So on the outside you can see it. It's pointing outwards, but there's one there and one there. And basically, here we go. One there and one there. Those two cameras are what contribute to your adaptive cruise. Also, this car has a suite. They call it a ADAS suite. There's so with the cameras, they call it eyesight. That helps with your lane assist, which actually warns you if you're crossing over a lane or getting too close to the edge. You also have the assistance on your mirror. There's a little light there that lights up on both sides. And that basically tells you when you're getting too close. It kind of warns you also when you're too close to a vehicle. So if there's an oncoming vehicle, that'll let you know that you're getting too close to merge, or you shouldn't merge because there's something obstructing either your trajectory or in your way. Now that function comes from here, LDW, if you can see that. So lane departure warning, if I were to turn that off, oh, it was off already. If I were to turn that off, you can actually see that little icon pop up. It will not be there if you have it on. And then that's when you get your warning when you're crossing over the lane, and also whether a vehicle is in your turning lane that you're trying to merge into. PCB, that's basically a warning to let you know you're getting too close to a vehicle ahead of you. Toyota calls it pre-collision braking system. Now, this new car has all the ADAS features. If you're a person like me, a driver that doesn't like all that extra, you have to turn it off. It asks you, are you sure? Yes. And then what that does is turns that on. So then it doesn't automatically detect a vehicle in front of you and brake for you. That's really what that is. And that's utilizing the camera and the radar function on this car. It has a couple of radars up front, has a couple of radars in the back. And with that, it's able to give you that driver assist. And then there's see the BSD and RCTA. So BSD, Toyota calls it blind spot detection, and RCT, rear crossing traffic alert. So if you were backing up and you were getting cross traffic, like let's say you're pulling out of a driveway in reverse, it'll actually tell you there's traffic crossing your way, and it'll beep at you and it'll let you know you shouldn't back up. And then also with the combination of BSD, your blind spot detection, so pedestrian or car, it'll actually let you know something's coming. And if you turn that off, it'll look like that, actually. There it is. See that little icon? It says off. Looks like a car detecting another car. That's what that is. And then lastly, SRH. Remember I mentioned the headlamps move in a different direction. They turn as you go. Basically, they call that steering response headlights. And that basically steers, as you steer, it steers the headlamps. You turn the steering wheel, it turns the headlamps. So it's kind of a neat feature when you're going, driving down a dark road and you're turning into mountain roads or a street or whatever. It actually steers in that direction. So I thought that was pretty cool. So with all those extra driver assists, you can choose. Now the thing with this car is all the driver assist features, if you want them off, like me, you have to go in there and turn them off. Great. But every time you turn off the car, everything else resets once you restart the car, except for the lane departure warning. So I think this is standard in a lot of these new cars, to where if I personally, as a driver, I got a sports car. I don't want those features, but they figure someone that daily drives this car, maybe you drive it for a few hours in traffic. Being here in LA, there's a lot of traffic. You get a little sleepy, you're not paying attention, it'll brake for you, it'll warn you, things like that. Sure, or the driver that isn't that attent to his spatial awareness, or he's not paying attention, like there's so many reasons. So federal law thought that was necessary to put on these cars. So. But if you want to, you can turn it off. Eyesight has to do with that. Those cameras up top that I showed you, there's features with that. You can manipulate the units and how it displays here. So you got kilometers and miles. Eyesight, you just got a few options in there, like sound and alert, your level of, I guess, comfort with acceleration, the drive lane. I haven't actually tried that yet, but I believe it's a drive lane as to where it's going to merge into a lane. I'm not sure, though. Don't quote me on that. And then you got your warning section. That's pretty much it for that digital cluster as far as in this mode. Now, down here. Again, if you're into sports driving and you want to go to the track, there's a few ways to turn this off. So if you press and hold track mode for a few seconds, you see that cluster change. Now it kind of looks like an S2000. Now, I had already turned off the front collision setting, but if you haven't done that already, once you do, then you get oil temps and coolant temps, and then it shows you your lap times there. So in order to get that full display, that's how you get it. Now, doing this takes off traction control, but you're like 90% of the way there. All right? You still will get an intervention, and that's from stability control. So if you press and hold that button, all right, for a few seconds. Now it's completely off, and you see right there, it'll tell you that it's off because it says traction off. That little squiggly car looks like it's drifting or losing control. It says off, and then all the other functions are off. So now you're 100% no traction control and then no stability control. So no intervention whatsoever, and that's how you want it when you go to the track if you don't want any kind of intervention. I figured that out after my dyno session with this car because it did not like the dyno with traction on. And then over here, your infotainment is pretty straightforward, honestly. There's not a whole lot. The only thing that gets interesting is when you plug in your phone to Apple CarPlay, to get Apple CarPlay or maybe some other Android app. The only way you can do that to connect to Apple CarPlay is by physically connecting this into your phone. And then once you do that, if I can get in the hole, there you go. So then you plug this in. Whoops, just let me do that for a second. Okay, cool. And then you get that option. Alright. So obviously I have to unlock my phone for it to show. Okay, now you're in Apple CarPlay, or if you have an Android, whatever else you're using. But at the moment you disconnect this phone, then it just disconnects automatically. You can still connect via Bluetooth and all that. You can still get your maps and whatever you want to use. This doesn't prevent your charging from stopping, so if you left your phone plugged in, it'll just max it out, and me personally, I don't like to max out my phone, just a little nuances of that. Then you got your usual climate control. Everything's digital, which is pretty cool. You got your sync mode to sync both passenger and driver side, and all that. And then lastly, as far as safety in this car has 7 airbags. Yeah. One here, one in there. Each of these seats on the bolster facing the door has an airbag. And then there's an airbag in the pillar. So 2 in each seat, 2 facing you, that's 4. 2 in the pillars, that's 6. And then, right where your knees are, there's an airbag down here. So that's 7. So 7 airbags. Alright, cool. This Trueno specifically, I guess, came with 8 speakers in their sound system. It didn't come with the sub. That's an additional option. And then there's a premium audio above that, but I guess this one has extra speakers than your base GR86. And that's pretty much it as far as features on this car. And then the last thing that you can't see is suspension. In this car, let me step up for this. It has Sachs dampeners. So Sachs suspension on front and rear. And so you got your McPherson strut set up in the rear, in the front, and then you have multi-link suspension in the rear, mated with Sachs suspension. They're a German company. They've tuned racing suspension for a long time. You can definitely feel the difference in this car. So I took the covers out of the trunk so you can see what's actually in here underneath. So I guess Toyota decided not to put a spare tire in here, but you got this option to store some equipment in here. Now this came with the car. Basically looks like a run flat kit. It's a compressor. It's got some fluid in there. Hook it up. There's a 12 volt that's actually inside your glove box, so you can run that all the way there. And then if you are leaking and you just need to get yourself by until the next tire shop, then you have that option. And then over here to the left, you got your tow hitch. Goes into the front. You got a screwdriver right there. And then on this right side, got a little mini breaker bar. Get the lug nuts loose. That looks like an amp. And that's pretty much it. I didn't get a sub or any additional audio, just whatever it came with. Right. We're under the hood of my Trueno. We're basically looking at the Toyota factory code FA24D. That's what the engine code is. And basically what that is, it's a 2.4 liter boxer engine. Now, the terminology for the word boxer, actually, if you're not familiar, it came from the concept of how the pistons move. So you guys are familiar with boxers, right? When they throw their punches, it's basically in a straight shot, like forward and back. You throw one left, pull it back, throw one right, pull it back. Well, that's basically how this engine functions. Instead of a typical piston engine, where it goes up and down, well, this actually goes side to side like it's throwing punches. So it does that in 2 different directions. So since it's a 4-cylinder, you got 2 cylinders on that side, 2 cylinders on that side. And Toyota rates it at 228 horsepower and 184 foot-pounds of torque at the flywheel. And that doesn't really mean a whole lot by itself, but if you refer back to my dyno video, I actually had it put on some hub dynos, and you got to see how much power it made to the wheels. And essentially you get to see what the power graph is. Now the difference between this FA24D from the previous gen with the FA20 is that the torque dip is gone. It has a substantial amount of torque increase in compared to the other one. Now the number overall doesn't seem like a lot, but it's where the power band in the graph is displayed. So the previous one, it did generate torque early, but then because of the massive dip between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM, it felt like you had nothing, like it was gutless down below. But once you rev past that, then it actually was happy. Well, this, it completely eliminated that dip. And not only that, it also increased the torque throughout the power band, so it actually feels a lot faster than the previous generations. So anyway, with this stock engine, they increased and added a few different things with technology, and they changed a few bits with how the block was made up. But the other big thing that stood out is that this thing has, it's what Subaru's equivalent to Honda's VTEC is. So they call it AVCS, which is Active Valve Control System, and basically on the heads it actually has variable valve timing, and so you get more duration and you get more timing advance according to the RPM, and that's why you feel so much more power out of this. That's part of the reason with how it revs out. This thing likes to rev to the moon, and it sustains its power. It's very linear. The other big part of it is that the displacement is increased. So think of it as this. So in the cylinder of this boxer that sits sideways, you have your bore and your stroke. So the stroke essentially is the distance that your piston travels up and down, or in this case side to side in the cylinder, and the bore is the width of the piston. So with this engine, they actually increased the width of the piston, so it has a wider bore. So when you increase the bore, you're essentially allowing more air and more fuel to be able to be pulled into the cylinder. You combust that and you're making more power essentially. So those two combinations actually help this engine produce the power that it makes. Otherwise, overall, they didn't do a whole lot, and I think that was a good thing. A lot of people say, why don't you turbocharge this engine? Well, honestly, where are you going to put it? The previous, or I should say its cousin cars, like the STI and the WRX and such, they have a bottom mount turbo. And if you were to do something like that, that's bottom fed, it would actually raise essentially the height of this engine. So another big part of this being a boxer engine is that it has a lower center of gravity. When you do other mods like that to accommodate a turbo or whatnot, then that would essentially raise it from factory. Yeah, you can do aftermarket. You can mount the turbo out in the front here, or maybe somewhere else, but essentially you're kind of taking away from this balance of this car. It weighs about, it's just a little over 2,800 pounds, so just slightly over, but from the previous. But honestly, even at 2,800 pounds, it's really impressive considering this car of today. A lot of cars are a lot heavier, well over 3,000 pounds, just because of all the added safety equipment. You have to think about crash safety, so you got airbags, and you got other implementations of safety, like having to have crumple zones and things like that. So when you add more and more technology as well, just overall, because a lot more components are computer controlled, you're adding more weight. So Toyota did something really amazing where they just tried to minimize the weight as much as possible for the sake of this just being a driver's car. They didn't want to add anything that was unnecessary, which I do appreciate. Kind of give you a better view and up close as to what everything's in this engine bay compartment. It's very compact, yes, but you kind of have everything exposed. You got your AC compressor up there, you got your alternator over there. If you need to change or bleed your clutch line or fluid, all of it is right there, your master and your slave. So just everything is just so exposed, but they try to keep it as simplistic as possible, but very easily accessible, which I thought was really cool. I noticed that the fans of this radiator are actually sitting at a slant, just for the sake of being able to save space and to close this hood, which I thought was really cool. You got your battery over here in the corner. But you can see it's very simple, but also they kind of kept in mind, they just want to keep everything as straightforward, as functional as possible. Anything that wasn't necessary, they try to eliminate. I want to talk about the front suspension a little bit, more so just show you. I'm going to tuck you in here. So this is referred to as a McPherson strut system. And if you were to take a look, you can see that lower arm that's right there. So there's just one of those. You got your brake caliper right there. But then if you look further up, you can see the spring in the strut. So that is basically all there is to it. It's just spring and strut attached to your lower control arm, and that makes your McPherson strut system. Now it's pretty straightforward. It's used pretty commonly in most cars. Like I have a 350Z and that's using this style. But there is one thing when it comes to modifying the suspension. For some of you guys that want to go lower, a lot of times you do. I get it. When you drop a car with McPherson suspension, this style, you actually end up not gaining as much camber as some of you might like. So you can go far low as much as you like. You actually will not achieve that. So that is just something you have to keep in mind. You will actually have to either get camber bolts or an aftermarket lower control arm to where you can exaggerate that geometry setup, or at the very, very top up there, if I can tilt this, at the very top where the hat sits, where it connects to the body of the car, you will have to get adjustable camber plates, and that's how you're able to achieve camber. So those are just something to keep in mind. Now here we're in the back of the car underneath. You can see there's more arms, but if I were to pivot that up, this one's considered a multi-link suspension setup, and basically what that means is instead of just a single lower arm, this one has multiple arms. You can see there's the spring and strut. That's the sway bar right there. There's also multiple linkages on this, and basically if you were to lower this car like I explained with the previous in the front, you actually can achieve more angle because you have essentially more adjustability with the geometry. So those are some of the two major differences when it comes to lowering the car, modifying the car, doing things like that. But again, you can get aftermarket arms and linkages to be able to modify the geometry of the suspension. I'm going to come out here. Now, I mentioned these brakes a little while ago, but I'm glad that Toyota decided to put Brembo brakes on this car. Now, it may not seem like a lot to a lot of people, but for enthusiasts, you understand why. Even with the GR, when they actually upgraded their brake system, instead of a single piston up front, they had a 2-piston caliper. And the brake pressure was, improved. It's overall better. But the rotor was still on the smaller side if you were intending to track the car. Now, with this having a much larger rotor, more surface area, and also have much bigger calipers like these, I do intend to track this car, and I'm really curious how well they'll hold up. I'm going to go to the front real quick. Now, when it comes to heat and sustaining temperatures on the track, a lot of people think bigger is better. That isn't the case. So even though these brakes are massive, I do get a lot of bite, and the response is really, really high. But over time, Toyota still threw on a Toyota pad, an everyday streetable pad, which basically means it can handle maybe somewhere between 100 to 200 degrees, but after a certain point, it's going to fade. And on the street, you don't really notice things like that until you start ABS stopping or hard braking consistently over and over. Now, these were designed to handle maybe one emergency stop, maybe two, But once you do 3, 4, or 5 in a row, then that's when stock pads tend to fade. I'm really curious, due to the extra surface area that this has and more pad, because typically with those two, you do dissipate a lot more heat, and with the extra venting that this thing allows to release heat from this vent, and then from the front, bringing in more heat, more air, sorry, more heat to dissipate the heat. So if you were in a turn with this car, you'll actually get that function of brake cooling. With this combination on this particular car, I'm really curious to see how well it does on the track. I'm not expecting it to do full sessions at like Button Willow or anything like that, but I am curious. And then lastly, let's talk about the tires. These Michelin Pilot Sport 4s, pretty amazing street tire. Now, for those of you who haven't experienced this tire, or even the predecessor, the Super Sport, it's a night-and-day difference. A lot of people say, you know, there's debatable what kind of parts you can throw at a car to make it transform, so to speak, but in my opinion, for the amount of money that you spend, that makes the most noticeable difference of handling characteristics, there's nothing like a good set of tires. Now, I know the base model does not come with these tires. They actually come with they're Primacies, which are referred to as like a Prius tire, because they do come with a similar type of tire. But these actually do really well in dry weather, in wet weather, and they have a pretty good wide range of heat and cold as far as the temperature ranges that they can perform in. Now, obviously, after a certain point, you can't drive these in snow, because when a temperature does drop to a certain point, the rubber will not adhere to that surface. It won't do its job. It'll get too cold, and then you're getting icy, basically. Slippery, not in the good way. And in extreme heat, like a track setting, these tires could only handle so much. But for all intents and purposes, for an everyday tire, these are really hard to beat. You get a lot of performance for what you get. I do want to show you these back seats. Alright. So, if you are a small human being like a child, or a plushie, that's probably all that'll fit back here. Yeah, I got my little 86 Trueno plushie back here. But anything larger than those two, you probably won't fit very much back here. Now, sometimes they throw in back seats in a car like this just to lower the insurance rate, but I think they already know that practically you probably won't fit very tall individuals. Now, I'm not that tall. I'm somewhere between 5'7" and 5'8". I usually say 5'7" and 3/4". Now, short story, I walked into a Dyna store, motorcycle gear, and wanted to get sized, full suit. So, of course, I walked up to a guy, he was Asian, and he looked at me, head to toe, and he said, "I know your size." Came back to me, gave me a suit, I tried it on, it fit like a glove. I looked at him, I was like, "How did you know?" And he looked at me and basically said, "You basically have a typical build of an Asian person, an average Asian guy." I'm like, "Oh, alright." So, take that as you wish, but I'm okay with that, because essentially I could fit back here. Probably not the most comfortable, but I would say once you get closer to 6 feet, forget about it. I mentioned earlier about the 12 volt that's actually in this glove box. It's a 12 volt socket, and I'm going to show you. So we take a peek in there. Let's see. You see that? See that cap right there? So if you were to flip that open, that's a socket. So that unit in the back that's in the trunk, if you have a flat, you want to run that compressor, there you go. You can plug it in right there. And then also, if you change your wheels, or if you repair a sensor, you break a sensor, you have to get it reset or what have you, that's the button. So if you got a track set of wheels, which I plan to get at some point, you before I start tracking. Keep my stock wheels. When I put them back, it might ask to reset them. That's the button. And you can find the procedure in the manual. It's pretty straightforward. Alright, there is one thing, okay, two things I do not like about this car. One of them is the ADAS features. It's a sports car. Why do I need assist? It doesn't make sense, or at least for me. Second, I'm sure you guys are familiar with that fake sound that comes in through the speakers. That's the other thing I don't get, because one, it's a boxer engine, it makes a cool sound. Does it really need an additional fake sound to tunnel in through the speakers? Me personally, I don't think so. So, I already went ahead and popped this guy off. There's a little piece right here. And basically, there is a sound box in there. You guys see that little Panasonic box? So, there is a plug right underneath. And if you unplug that, that'll actually take away the sound. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, because that's technically, if you want to call it my mod, my first mod of this car is to disable the sound in the speakers. And that's basically, if you're not familiar, fake sound that comes in once you rev up past a certain RPM to simulate engine noise. Again, I think that's goofy, because this car sounds good, in my opinion, as is. So that's the only real thing that bothers me about this car outside of the ADAS features. Just kidding. There was one more thing about this car I do not like. So 3. It's more of an annoyance of anything. When you start to drive without your seatbelt on, like let's just say you're trying to pull into a parking spot, or you want to get in and move your car real quick, if you don't clip in the seatbelt, it'll start chiming at you. And the longer it goes, the louder it gets. And it's really obnoxious, extremely loud. I found a hack online, and I read about it. I seen it on YouTube. Another owner that actually discovered it and said that he thought it was a joke, but he was willing to try it out. Basically, you spam the seatbelt over and over. So this guy right here, if you were to plug it in when the accessory is on number 2, so basically hit this button twice, once, twice again. From this point forward, you have 30 seconds to plug in the seatbelt in and out as many times as you can. They said 20. I mean, do it as many as you can just to make sure you're spamming it enough. Apparently, this disables the sound. Go figure. The other thing is, if you want to physically disconnect the speaker, you can actually take this nice little material piece off. Same thing with the speaker box sound. You can actually disconnect. It's another speaker in here. Disconnect that for the chime, and then that goes away. So this shifter, if you haven't driven a Subaru before, it has a very direct mechanical feel, like notchy when you shift. And every time you shift, you can feel it. Like, it's almost as if you can feel the synchros meshing onto the gear. It's you can really feel that vibration, that sensory, through the shifter itself. I think it's cool. I like it. It's a lot more engaging. It just lets you know that you are in gear. I think this is probably one of the best shifters as far as driver feedback as you can get. Now, there's a whole bunch of different types of shifters out there, but as far as this sensation in particular, I like that sensation because it tells you. It's very, like, there's no guessing as to whether you're in gear or not. It tells you, oh yes, I am in gear, because you can feel it go all the way in. So my particular Trueno came with this auto dimming rear view mirror, along with the home link system where you can sync it to your garage. So I'm going to show you how the auto dim looks. Right now it has a bluish hue tint, but then as soon as that went down, it went clear. Now if you didn't catch that, I'm going to open it again. And then it has a bluish hue tint. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's kind of subtle. I'm trying to focus in on it, but I don't know if you can tell that little outline right there, kind of like around the lens. You might not be able to see it very well, but there's a blue tint. And then the moment that I close this, you should see that blue tint go away. Do you see it? I'm going to open it one more time so you can catch it. There it is. So this car does have an auto high beam feature, and the way to toggle that is, one, it has to be, there's conditions, right? It has to be dark out. There can't be any headlamps facing you. There can't be any street lamps that are really bright. Like, it has to be very specific dark conditions. Once it determines all those things, right here in the switch, instead of your normally just, oh, let's focus, alright, instead of normally just turning your headlamps on, if you're anything like me and you just want to control that feature, you can do that. Now, let's see if I can show you both. Ooh, no. So, set it to auto, and right there. So it looks like a headlamp with an A right in the middle. Now, there's a way to turn that on or off. Now, make sure it's set to auto. You push the lever forward where you toggled on your headlamps. Now you see you got your high beam on, so it's off right now, it's just high beam. Push it again, goes back to auto. And if you don't want that at all, just turn it up to your regular high beam or even your parking lights, and then you won't have that feature at all. That's what this new car, using the cameras and sensors to determine whether you can use auto high beam or not. Then you got your keyless entry settings. You can do a variety of things, just depending what your preference is. I think the driver unlock is when you slip your hand in there. I think that's kind of cool. Hazards flash, making a sound. Defogger, you can actually set how long you want it to, 15 minutes or continuous, I guess is unlimited. Interior light, you can time that, depending on your preference. Auto sensor light, now this is for sensitivity for rain when it comes to, well, there's two things, light sensitivity and then your wiper link, which coincides with the same sensor, but it tells you when to wipe. Your welcome light, you can have it settings to turn on or leave for a certain period of time, whether you approach the car or walk away from the car. One touch lane changer, basically if you were to tap the turn signal, you can do it just like that where it's off, or just literally flicks, or you turn it on and tap it, stays on for three flashes. So it's up to you. I have it off. Now this is where you get a little bit in depth. Screen setting, you got your startup screen with the boxer engine, the pistons and the 8.6 and all that kind of happening all at once. You turn that on off. Then GSI, that's the setting that shows you optimum fuel economy, like tips and tricks, kind of like telling you when to shift and which gear to be in, and you know how to drive economically depending on what you're doing. So that's what that is. Kind of has like a little assists here and there that pop up on the screen. And then you got rev, and this tells you whether your indicator is on or off, and then you can set your RPM. So I have it to 73, but you can set it as low as 2000. the buzzer. That's basically it.